Euro 17. And the LBC weather turning windier in the west tonight, but it should be mainly dry, a low of 3 degrees. Wind and rain spreading eastwards across England and Wales tomorrow with a high of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. I'm broadcasting to you from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. It's my last ever day here. I'll reflect on that perhaps a little bit later on. And also, for Brexiteers, some good news has emerged about what will happen on the evening of the 31st of January. More of that later in the show. But today, at Prime Minister's Questions, a clash between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn over the National Health Service, and this is an issue that will not go away. Let's hear the two of them going hammer and tongs.
There probably isn't a family in the United Kingdom which hasn't been affected in some way by cancer. Yet last year we saw 1 in 4 patients waiting more than 2 months for the start of their cancer treatment. How many more patients will face what are life-threatening delays because our NHS is understaffed and underfunded?
Mr. Speaker, as the right honourable gentleman knows, there is a massive demand on the NHS, which, as he also knows, is doing a fantastic job, particularly actually in oncology, where tremendous progress has been made. He's right to signal the delays that people are facing, and they are indeed unacceptable, and that is why we are investing in 50,000 more nurses. That's why we're investing in 6,000 more GPs, and that is why this government is investing record sums in the NHS. We will get those waiting lists down.
So that was Boris saying, look, we have a plan for the National Health Service, but Jeremy Corbyn went on to refer the Prime Minister to the Labour manifesto of the recent general election, claiming Labour had a better plan.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Prime Minister had a chance to read the Labour manifesto in the election, but we made it very clear. We have a plan. We have a plan, a very clear one. I'm very happy to send him another copy of our manifesto so he can read it. The NHS is our most precious national institution. Fund it properly, that everyone can rely on it, those that cannot afford private health care.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted he's still fighting on the manifesto that he submitted to the attention of the British people in the last election. I think it was pretty clear what they thought of it, what they thought of the credibility of the promises that he made. But it was also clear what they thought of what we're going to do, because they see that we are the party of the NHS, Mr. Speaker.
Well, it's an argument that will never go away, and today's set to in the House of Commons against the backdrop of the fact that latest figures from NHS England showing that accident and emergency waiting times have hit their worst ever level in December, with 1 in 5 attending A&E waiting for more than 4 hours to be seen at all. So I'm asking today, is your experience of the National Health Service as bad as Jeremy Corbyn makes out? If you think, no, he's exaggerating, actually, on balance, it does a pretty good job. Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think, yep, it's deteriorating, and pretty quickly. Text to 84850 and tell me, what changes would you like to see? And I'm particularly keen to hear from nurses, doctors, anybody involved in the healthcare sector. What changes do we need to make this better? Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Well, to me, it's pretty obvious that the real issue here, they keep talking about demand. There's increased demand. Well, I'll tell you why there's increased demand. Because there are 6 million more people living in this country than there were in 2001. We have a population explosion. We hadn't planned for it. We'd no idea just how many people were going to come net into our country. And that is the problem. And we are going to need to spend a hell of a lot more money just to stand still. Not that that means, in my view, that just spending money is the answer. And we do see story after story of NHS waste, of too much money being paid for by with drugs. So there's clearly something wrong with the management there too. But I can't pretend to have a magic wand. But maybe you work in the health sector, and maybe you've got some big ideas on this. Tell me, is Corbyn right? Is the NHS understaffed, underfunded and in real trouble. Let us go to Nigel in St James's Park, who is a new caller. Good evening, Nigel.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well indeed, thank you. I certainly can. So,
Yeah,
do you have recent experience of the NHS?
Yeah, I do. You've just taken the wind out of my sails, because what I'm going to say, you just said.
Sorry.
Yeah, I did. I go for two things. One thing is that I'm going for bowel cancer treatment, and I have to go every 3 years, and I also have to go every 6 months for prostate. I went in recently, because I'm getting old now, I'm 58, and I had problems with reflux. So when I went in, straight away they said, you haven't been for your tests. So they lined them up, and I had them. You know, they tell you off. And it's, you know, if I had cancer, it'd be my own fault for not going correctly. And what you do say about over management and things like that, I think it's correct. We've got more managers than we've got nurses. You know, and years ago we used to have a matron that would look after the hospital and the people. And we've taken a large core of people that perhaps can't fill forms in, but they're very good at cleaning beds, they're very good at cleaning people. We've taken them out of the system, which I think we need to bring them back, because they'll probably do better than nurses, because they all have to fill forms in. They're not looking after people. You know, and that's what I think. There was,
you know, certainly from sort of 1997, in the first 15 years, there was something like a 44% growth in the numbers of people working in management. So I clearly think there is a problem there. On balance, Nigel, and by the way, I wish you well with all the treatment you're having. On balance, though, do you feel, despite the difficulties, that you've been treated well?
I've been treated marvellous. You know, when you go in, they're very understanding. And God hope you haven't been for any of them treatments, and they're not nice. They really aren't nice. You know, it's embarrassing, it's invasion and whatever. But they treat you so kindly, so friendly. And what you're having done is very, very invasive, you know? And you're, you know...
Yeah, and they're working under pressure, aren't they? They're working under real pressure, Nigel, too, aren't they?
Well, they do. It's all ticking boxes and whatever, and they shouldn't be ticking boxes. What they should be doing is getting on with the job, you know, and they're...
All right, no, Nigel, you've made the point about too much bureaucracy very well. I wish you well. Thank you. Hill in Manchester is a new caller to the show. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. First of all, I love your show. I listen every evening to it, and Sunday mornings. Best show ever on LBC,
well, thank you. Thank you very much. And this is the first time you've picked up the phone, though, yeah?
Well, to you, yeah. First time to you, yeah.
OK, well, welcome. So, Jeremy Corbyn is painting a very, very bleak picture. Boris Johnson saying it's in hand. We've got 50,000 more nurses coming, although I think 20,000 of those actually are there already at the moment. And there's 6,000 more doctors and there's more money. How bad are things in the NHS, in your view?
Well, I've been the past 4 years in the NHS with my son. He's a heart condition. I think the staff, I don't think it's understaffed. I think there's a nurse for everything and the wonderful staff. I don't think it's so understaffed. So I don't know what Jeremy Corbyn's on about understaffed. Maybe the funding maybe could be a bit high, but I don't think about staff. I think the staff are there.
Well, I guess the argument is that if waiting times at accident and emergency are the worst ever, maybe there is a problem. Or could it be that because people can't get GP appointments, they go to A&E instead?
Yeah, that's the main thing. If you can't get a GP appointment, I mean, I'm terrible with GP appointment. You can't get anywhere with it. That's why I rush to A&E. It's the best available option. That's why you wait so long, because there's no GP available.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very major part of it. I really, really do. What is there one big change that you'd like to see in the NHS?
Well, the GPs, that's the main thing. It needs to be more GPs and more appointments. You can wait for appointments in 2 weeks' time. If you need an appointment today or tomorrow, you can't get one. That's why when I had a problem with my son, I always rushed to A&E because there's no GP available. I think the GP needs to be the main thing on the next agenda.
Yeah, do you know what? I think that is one of the most powerful points. I think it does actually set the backdrop to the debate that happened between Corbyn and Johnson today. Thank you very much indeed for your call. And look, I made the point about pressure with population, but the one area, the one way we take pressure off the hospitals is to make sure people can get GP appointment. If you can't get a GP appointment for 2 or 3 weeks, and what's the point? If you're ill, you want to see somebody quickly, surely. Katie in Southwark is another new caller. Good evening, Katie.
Hi, Mr. Farage. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Corbyn. And I'm quite intrigued because I feel that maybe you would be of the same view, given that one of your reasons for why we should have left the EU was because of the millions of pounds that would have been put back into our NHS.
Well, it's a reason, Katie. I mean, the real reason I wanted to leave the EU was actually literally so that we could make our own laws, control our own borders. And yes, I thought we could save some money too. Yeah, sure.
But the NHS was a big part of that. I think that was a big reason why lots of people did vote to leave. I voted leave, and that was the main reason. But obviously, that money, it doesn't appear that money is going back into the NHS. I do think our NHS is in crisis. And money
Katie,
should be invested.
Theresa May argued that the amount she increased spending by was exactly that had been promised by Vote Leave in the campaign. So I think the point, Katie, is that we can keep putting billions and billions and billions more into the NHS, but demand on our hospitals, demand on our health service just goes up and up and up. That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, the more that we put in, the more the demand is. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think we can keep up. We just can't keep up with, we could never, no government predicted that our population would rise by the amount it's risen, right? It stunned everybody, and we're playing catch up the whole time. And I have to be honest, I think we're going to need a lot more money for the NHS. But I've already had a caller saying that it seems to be an awful lot of form filling, an awful lot of box ticking, that it's too bureaucratic. So maybe it isn't just money, maybe it's how it's actually spent.
I think it's how it's run. I think it's the fact that it's been privatised. My friend works for the NHS and has said that's had major impact on the NHS. And that's clearly Boris's next step, is to keep privatising our NHS. So, well,
Katie, we'll have to see. Mr. Blair privatised quite a big chunk of the NHS, and I know a lot of people are unhappy with that. Katie, thank you very much indeed for your call. And I have to say, I have used the NHS very much more than most people, twice in real emergency situations. Once when I was smashed to bits by a car, another time when I was very lucky to get out of an aeroplane crash. So I've been severely wounded twice, wheeled in, in trouble, on a trolley. And I've got to tell you something, if you're in real trouble, if you're in emergency, a real emergency, the NHS are completely and utterly outstanding. When it comes to diagnostics and other issues, there are certainly some problems. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:15, and time for the news headlines with Tim Humphrey.
A man wanted in connection with the murder of a police officer in Bradford more than 14 years ago has been arrested in Pakistan. Rival airlines say the decision to allow Flybe to defer a tax bill is unfair, but ministers insist they're acting within the rules. The impeachment managers who will prosecute the case against Donald Trump have been announced in the US House of Representatives. LBC weather turning windier in the west tonight, but mainly dry, and a low of 3 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff. There are queues on the M20 westbound. The exit slip road to the M25 anti-clockwise at junction 1 for Swanley is closed for emergency repairs. It's slow on the M25 clockwise. That's because the car's broken down between junction 23 for the A1M and junction 24 for Potters Bar. Queues remain on the M25 anti-clockwise towards junction 23 for the A1M after emergency repairs earlier on. There are queues in the centre of town on Piccadilly, Haymarket and around Trafalgar Square because of a black cab demonstration. In Paddington, there are delays on Edgware Road northbound. It's partly blocked because of an investigation at Edgware Road Station. In Kingston, Richmond Road northbound is closed near Sainsbury's because of an investigation, so there are queues. And on the train, South Eastern have delays of over an hour and some cancellations between Rochester and Faversham. It's after there was an investigation earlier.
This is LBC.
The birthday cake didn't arrive in time. The centrepieces never made it to the wedding. And by the time the brass band got to their concert, everyone had left. Breakdowns are rubbish, especially when you run a business. So when we make vans at Volkswagen, we make them as reliable as possible. Which is why we've just won Most Reliable Van Maker at the Fleet News FN50 Awards. Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles. Working with you. Visit Fleet News for full award criteria.
This is LBC.
Hello? It's time you swapped your daily grind for some sun, sea, and salsa. Sangria. Sun lounger. Siesta. Salsa. The dip. Sandals. Suntan lotion. We've done salsa, ain't we? In the Seychelles, Spain, or anywhere else in the world at surprisingly low prices. When you need a holiday, it's time to Travel Republic. Book with confidence at All Protected.
Air France.
La France
is in the air. With our new Oh La La deals, you don't just have to imagine. You can be strolling the sandy beaches of Cape Town, exploring the Forbidden City in Beijing, or discovering the Old Town in Quito. Oh la la, c'est magnifique! You can afford to let your imagination fly far, far away. Air France.
La France
is in the air. Book your flights via Paris by Tuesday the 21st of January at airfrance.co.uk.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
We live in an age where you can stream any box set instantly. But staying on top of our pensions is anything but instant. PensionBee can transfer most old pensions together into one simple online plan. So you can manage your pension on your smartphone as simply as streaming that box set. Download the app or visit pensionbee.com today.
Authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Capital at risk.
This is LBC, live from Strasbourg. The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn paints a real picture of woe when it comes to the NHS, and I'm asking you whether your experience says that Corbyn is right about this. Emma in Norfolk says, no, for us the NHS is not as bad. Our eldest daughter had a condition that caused her to have seizures multiple times a day. Our local hospital could not treat her. We were referred to Great Ormond Street within days. She had treatment there for 18 months. Appointments at both hospitals were on time and the staff were amazing. Emma, that is a great story. I wonder whether if you're a child, you perhaps get fast-tracked in a way that an adult wouldn't. I don't know the answer to that, but I sort of kind of suspect it. I have no issues with the health services. Ryan from Scotland. They've been absolutely fantastic helping manage my mental health. Appointments have been quick and doctors have been great. So there we are. There's some very strong testimonials, and no one's arguing ever with this debate that we don't think as doctors and nurses are committed to what they do. My first wife was a nurse, utterly dedicated to what she did. She's still doing it. But I think working under far more pressure today than she was perhaps 35 years ago. Let's go to Patricia in Coulsdon, who's a new caller. Good evening, Patricia.
Good evening, Nigel. I wanted to let you know I had a stroke on the 27th of September. I was taken into hospital, not into A&E. I saw a doctor within 5 minutes, and she gave me 6 tablets. I couldn't speak. I'd lost my power of speech, although my legs and arms were okay. And believe it or not, within that 5 minutes, I was talking to her. Now, the treatment I've had since, and I won't mention where it was, it's been absolutely brilliant throughout the whole of the National Health Service, and I am deeply, deeply grateful because I'm almost 86 years old, and they treated me as though I was a private patient.
That is absolutely amazing. So when you went into A&E, I guess because you had...
They wheeled me straight onto the lift, up to the ward. I sat down on the bed where the sister put me, and within 5 minutes, the doctor was with me.
That's amazing. Well, I tell you what, you couldn't get better than that anywhere in the world, could you?
No, you really couldn't. I was astonished. It was so good. And since I left hospital after 4 days, I was fine. I was talking normally. And I've been back 4 times for scans and different other things to do with it. And every time I've been seen within 10 minutes of arriving at the hospital. I cannot believe how brilliant they are.
That is an amazing story. I'm going to say to other listeners, beat that, because that's a remarkable story, and thank you for sharing that with us. And that a story coming from just on the edge of the Greater London area, so one of the most populated parts of the country. So there are some good news stories out there too. It's not all bad news. Peter in Notting Hill is a new caller. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So, how sick is the NHS?
Yeah, Nigel, I have experience from the National Health Service of two countries. One is Denmark. I'm a Danish national, and the other one is the NHS here in the UK. And from my perspective, I've lived here now for 20 years. Everything I've experienced with the NHS is on par or better than what I see in Denmark.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm amazed by that, because we always think that Scandinavia has got public services absolutely, the Swedish model and all the rest of it, and we hear stories that Danish people are happy to pay higher taxes because they think government will spend the money very well, and you think our NHS is superior.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, Mr. Corbyn should talk it up, not talk it down. So, for instance, when I go to see my GP, I normally do it through the walking sessions. So I go towards the time where it closes, and you maybe wait 15 minutes. You sit with the GP. I had a couple of bouts of pneumonia, so I had to go and have an X-ray done, which is one of the local hospitals. No waiting time at all. You just walk in. Maybe you sit for 2 minutes. They take your X-ray, and you walk out.
So how can it be? How can it be that millions of people say they can't get a GP appointment for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I have to say, Nigel, I've always been puzzled by these press stories that the NHS is so bad. I don't know whether it's better where I live or worse in other places for some certain reasons.
Okay.
But I tried it in out in the southwest of the country, also where we had a child on holiday, a Danish child actually, and the NHS service they took him in, they saw him immediately. So I have only had good experiences.
Well, Peter, I think when it comes to getting GP appointments, you may be the exception and not the rule, but I thank you for your testimony, and I put a challenge out there. Peter says it's easy to get an NHS appointment. If you've got trouble getting a GP appointment, if you're having problems getting one, please explain how difficult it is on 0345 6060 973. On Facebook, Philip says, I went to my local A&E the other night with excruciating neck pain at 2 o'clock in the morning. I didn't leave the hospital until 7:30 in the morning. There were a couple in the waiting room who'd been there for 9 hours. Paul says, Nigel, don't forget about the bed blocking problems. Now, I know there are hundreds of patients who are well enough to go to respite centres, but I'm afraid they're not able to reduce the beds. That doesn't reduce the burden. Yeah, I mean, I've quite often been told this, that respite centres and that's where one of the real shortages is. There's no perfect answer to any of this, but in the last few minutes, a lot of you have given pretty glowing testimony about your experiences of the National Health Service. I wonder whether that's the same in Gloucester. For Alistair, another new caller. Good evening, Alistair.
How you doing, Nigel? Are you okay?
I am well. So everyone's telling me, not everyone, but a few our last callers, that they actually find getting GP appointments and being treated very easy. Others, I think, have a different experience.
Yeah, I've had very, very good experiences and sadly two terrible experiences. One was with one of my birth of one of my children. It was a planned cesarean section. Everything seemed to be going well. Came in, the cesarean started, and soon realised that it was just a catalogue of errors. Machines weren't connected correctly. My son, although his heartbeat was reading well, he came out stillborn with an APGAR score, I think, of 0, which is basically, I think it's like the worst score you can get. His life lost, no heartbeat, no breathing. Came out looking like he'd been covered in Ribena, just where it's so purple. There's just no life in him at all. After several attempts to try and resuscitate him, a very panicked room, very disorganised, shouting between the staff. Midwife found out crying. I was in there with my wife. Sadly, she had to be put to sleep instantly. She was awake with an epidural because it went that bad. After about 20 minutes to resuscitate him, it took 2 injections into the heart of pure adrenaline. before his heart started. And then he still was without oxygen for about another 3 or 4 minutes after that. And the only reason he wasn't with oxygen was that they hadn't filled the room with the right equipment for a 4-term baby. It had been connected for a preterm baby, so there's different pressure on lungs depending on the baby's. If it's a baby that's born too early, they need more pressure. Their lungs aren't developed, and if it's a 4-term baby, they need less pressure. So although they put oxygen on him, he was getting no oxygen, so he's still not breathing. So his blood basically turned to acid. There's no oxygen in his blood at all. He had to get sent to a specialist hospital about an hour away to receive some specialist treatment that wasn't provided by the NHS. It was provided by a charity. I don't want to mention names, but this is a charity, so I'm going to mention this charity name. It's Sparks Charity. And the Freemasons have given about 200,000-300,000 towards the charity recently. So really, really, really good charity. It's done by sportsmen and sportswomen.
Okay. I have heard of it.
That was the first sort of incident, and then the second one, which I think is a massive problem, is the receptionists. I took my son in, another child of mine. He's one of those children who just never complains. They're never ill. They're never in pain. They have a cold and you don't even know about it. And he was screaming one day, and I knew something wasn't right. So I bypassed, didn't go to the GP. I went straight to the hospital because he's my son. I know my son. And I went to reception, and reception said, no, go. And I said, no, my son's ill, look at him. And they said, have you even been to the GP? I said, no, it's an emergency, something's not right with him. And she said, you're not going to be seen by a triage nurse, you're not going to be seen by a doctor, go to a GP, and then come back. And I said, look, I'm not even listening to you. She didn't even book him in, and I bypassed her, I knocked on the doctor's door, and he came in, and he looked at him, and he pulled out an emergency, raised the alarm, and 25 minutes later he's in surgery having his appendix out. And if I wasn't the parent I was, that didn't listen.
You pushed.
My son
Alistair,
might have been here.
Well, your first experience obviously sounds horrendous. And the second experience you had, look, you know what? There's a huge number of people working for the NHS. Yeah. You're always going to get one or two bad people there. But you as a pushy parent.
This was under Tony Blair's Labour government in 2008. And that was after 11 years. 11 years of Labour. So Jeremy Corbyn putting the spin in. There's always been issues with the NHS. Don't blame the Conservatives. Don't blame Liberals. Don't blame Labour.
I'm not sure that a bad receptionist is Tony Blair's fault or anybody's fault. Alistair, they are horrible stories about the NHS. Thank you for being brave enough to come on and share them with us. Well, we've had good stories, we've had bad stories. What I want to hear from you now is what needs to be done to improve the NHS. And I want to hear from some medical professionals. Please, this is the Nigel Farage Show, live on LBC at 6:30 in time for the news headlines with Tim Humphrey.
A man wanted in connection with the murder of a police officer in Bradford more than 14 years ago has been arrested in Pakistan. Sharon Beshamnitsky had only served 9 months in West Yorkshire Police when she was shot during a robbery. The people who will prosecute the impeachment case against Donald Trump have been named in the US. Politicians in the House of Representatives are voting now on whether to transfer the charges against the president to the Senate, where a trial will take place next week. IAG, the owner of British Airways, has complained to the European Union over the UK government's rescue of Flybe. The agreement allows the airline to postpone paying some of its taxes. LBC weather turning windier in the west tonight, but it should be mainly dry, a low of 3 degrees.
Eddie Mayer.
How much support should the British government give over Iran?
I think I should give full support. Let's not believe that the Iranians play by Queensberry rules.
Well, this is hardly Queensberry rules, is it? State-sponsored assassination.
You cannot trust the Iranians.
So you should murder them from the sky. The White House is not telling us about the apparent imminent threat that this man was to us all.
Eddie Mayer, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Air France.
La France
is in the air. With our new Oh La La deals, you don't just have to imagine. You can be strolling the sandy beaches of Cape Town, exploring the Forbidden City in Beijing, or discovering the Old Town in Quito. Oh la la, c'est magnifique! you can afford to let your imagination fly far, far away. Air France. France.
La France.
Is in the air. Book your flights via Paris by Tuesday the 21st of January at airfrance.co.uk.
Hello? It's time you swapped your daily grind for some sun, sea, and salsa! Sangria! Sun lounger! Siesta! Salsa! The dip. Sandal! Suntan lotion! We've done salsa, ain't we? In the Seychelles, Spain, or anywhere else in the world at surprisingly low prices. When you need a holiday, it's time to Travel Republic. Book with confidence at Toll Protected.
Standard. Stagnant. Same old, same old. That's not how you describe London. We're, well, different. London loves bright new ideas, embraces vibrant, evolving communities, and isn't afraid of standing out. We deserve an energy company that's as different as we are, one that's fair and affordable for all Londoners. London Power, a different kind of energy company.
Word in the woods is that three little pigs are looking to sell their homes quick. They seem to be in a spot of bother with a big bad wolf called Rick.
Come out, little piggies!
So they spoke to the friendly team at Property Rescue, who can offer a guaranteed sale in as little as 48 hours at a fair price and a cash advance if you need one. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Strasbourg, only on LBC.
Well, a bit of good news today as far as I'm concerned, because the Leave Means Leave, the cross-party campaign group, the bid that was put into the Mayor's office that needed to be looked at by the Mayor's office and, of course, looked at too by Westminster Council to hold an event in Parliament Square on the 31st of January has got approval. So there will be a stage and an event starting at 9 p.m. in Parliament Square. It'll go on until about 11:15, something like that. And we'll be there for that moment at 11 o'clock to mark a big moment in history when, after 47 years, we leave the European Union. And it's taken a long time to get it, but we've got it. And we're going to organise an event. There'll be people, there'll be non-party political completely. There'll be people from all walks of life. There'll be a few little speeches, a bit of a sing-song. It should be a very jolly occasion to mark a moment in history. But what, I hear you say, of Big Ben? Will Big Ben bong for Brexit? More on that in the next few minutes. But I'm going to get back to the NHS and some really very, very passionate calls. Nara says, my friend spent hours waiting in a corridor with her father with dementia on a stretcher. He had pneumonia. It's a postcode lottery. Yes, I think it is a postcode lottery. I think it does matter actually where you live. It makes a huge difference. On Twitter, I get Pixie from County Durham saying, in certain areas, the NHS is really under strain, certainly in heavily populated areas, but no one wants to talk about that problem. Well, Pixie, I do want to talk about that problem. We have also, of course, an ageing population, but a rapidly rising population. And that is at the heart of the demand problem. But nobody on the front benches of either party would dare say a thing like that, would they? What needs to be done to make the NHS better? I'm going to go to Swanley and speak to Jeff, who's a new caller. Jeff, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Very nice to speak with you.
Good to speak to you. So, good experiences, bad experiences?
Very, very good, Nigel. I recently was diagnosed with skin cancer on my nose, and I had to go to the Guy's Cancer Centre, which is almost, it appears almost brand new. It's a fantastic facility with very modern environment and very, very pleasant staff. Even the retired part-time people that are guides there to show you where to go and where the lifts are and which rooms to go to. I went there for some day surgery, and my nose had to be cut away in various sections until they'd removed all the skin cancer. And all the staff were so caring and they showed empathy. And very, 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 very professional. I then had to go to St Thomas's Hospital to have plastic surgery, where they moved some skin from one side of my face to cover the big area of my nose that they removed. And again, all the staff there, you could not wish for more supportive people to help you when you're in dire need of help.
That's a big testimony.
Yeah, you just cannot fault them, and I'm fed up of hearing people knocking the NHS when there's so many very, very good people there in the job. For the right reason,
you've just name checked two of the big London hospitals, and you talked about cancer. Jeremy Corbyn today was very specific in talking about cancer, where he felt that cancer care in the NHS was falling down. Do you think Corbyn's message is just overly negative?
I think Jeremy Corbyn. Well, I'm not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn myself. I'm fed up with him using the NHS as a political football. He needs to speak with people who've actually had care. Maybe they're falling down at the end where you're trying to get the appointment with your local GP. But if you're in need, as you mentioned earlier, the two times you've had to use the NHS for a very, very serious time.
Oh yeah,
they've been there for you.
Do you know, Jeff?
Faultless.
Yeah. When I was taken out of that aeroplane and taken in an ambulance to a hospital in Banbury, and I was on a trolley, and I sort of wheeled in, and because they knew I was on my way, and I was badly smacked up, there were a team of about 10 people there waiting for me. And before I knew it, I'd been whipped through a CT scan, I'd had the stitches done. There was even a nurse there holding my hand through most of it. I mean, the whole experience, well, I was pretty scared, Jeff, because I knew I was pretty badly hurt.
Yeah.
But I have to say, that was marvellous. And yet, when I had cancer back in the 1980s, I was misdiagnosed for 7.5 weeks. I had a problem. Really? I kept going back. I was misdiagnosed. I then went for a second opinion. I was on the operating table within 12 hours. Now, I think the truth of this is that with so many hundreds of thousands of people working for it, however good 99% of them are, there'll always be one or two that make mistakes. You'll always have human error. You'll always have a few bad apples. But in general, Jeff, my experience of me and my family of the NHS, on balance, I think they're pretty marvellous. And thank you, Jeff, for sharing that with us. Well, Jeff, they're naming, and when you think about it, those London hospitals must be under the most enormous pressure. I mean, huge pressure. And Jeff, they're saying, both St Thomas's and Guy's, he was treated incredibly well. Let's go to West London and speak to Grace. Grace in Ealing, good evening.
Evening. Hi. My mum is a nurse, a practice nurse with a GP surgery. And so far as I understand, one of the problems is that various things that were previously done by GPs are now left to nurses. And that's meaning that nurses are under more and more pressure, and then certain things that were previously done by nurses are done by other staff. So part of the issue is actually that staff are under a huge amount of pressure. Clearly, obviously, there are very varied stories about treatment that people are receiving. I think we're incredibly fortunate. If you look at the work of organisations like Médecins Sans Frontières or Mercy Ships, you can see that we are incredibly privileged, and most human beings on our planet could only dream of the healthcare that we have. But you're very wrong to think that population is the issue when our NHS is struggling, because if we have a bigger population, we have more medical staff and more people paying taxes that support the NHS. So I think what we really need is more education to try to reduce things that can be mitigated. Lots of lifestyle issues that contribute.
We don't have the buildings, Grace. We don't have the hospitals. It's all well and good employing more nurses and more doctors because the population's rising and there are more patients, but there's an infrastructure problem here, isn't there?
But you also have many people coming from elsewhere who are builders. A lot of people who are builders are people from other parts of the world. So I think to try to pin the blame on immigrants, as you seem to be doing, is not necessarily accurate.
Well, I'm not doing that, Grace. What I'm saying is this. I'm saying the British population has risen by 6 million people since 2001, a figure that was unthinkable to everybody in 2001. And yes, I'm saying that 80% of that is a result of government migration policies over those years. But what I'm saying to you is actually the government have been completely incompetent because we didn't keep a grip on our borders. We couldn't anticipate what was needed in years to come. That's the point I'm making.
Again, I just think that, human beings elsewhere on the planet are actually just as entitled to healthcare as we are, and more people coming in means more taxes are paid that support the NHS. But also privatisation means that more money ends up in the pockets of fat cats, and the Tories have been allowing more and more privatisation to happen.
No, Grace. It's the Labour Party that privatised a very large chunk of the health
Blair's
service.
Labour Party is very different to the current Labour Party.
Yeah. And let alone some of the PFI deals that were done on the hospitals that have left us a very long... I'm trying not to be party political about this, Grace. I really am. And I was struck in the recent general election that when we have these debates about the NHS, actually, all the parties want the same thing. They all want a national health service that is free at the point of delivery. And I do wonder whether this should be less of a political football. I really do.
I think it should be less political football. And as I've said, I think we need to look at people elsewhere in the world who can't even get basic vaccinations in infancy and remember how fortunate we are and how much actually we can help some of those people.
OK, no, fine. Grace, get the point. Thank you. OK, Carl in Norfolk tweets, Nigel, I booked my last GP appointment on the 12th of December. I haven't had it yet. It's not due until the 24th of January. 7.5 weeks. This is standard for my local surgery. Although 4 receptionists seem to be the norm with an automated check-in. Ridiculous. Carl, that, and we had, didn't we? We had somebody from London saying, oh, there's no problem, you just walk straight in. 7.5 weeks, I think that's the worst I've ever heard, Carl, and maybe we can say it's over Christmas, but goodness gracious me. Breaking news, the US House of Representatives have voted to send impeachment articles to the Senate for President Donald Trump's trial. So this impeachment is going ahead. I don't know. I saw Nancy Pelosi on the telly earlier. I think they're beginning to regret the fact they've done this because the more obsessed, the more time they spend fighting Donald Trump on this impeachment with zero chance of it actually finishing up in the president being removed, they might wonder afterwards whether they might have been better off, the Democrats, spending time getting ready to fight a presidential election. That's just my thought. More on Big Ben and will it bong for Brexit and how are the authorities behaving? But for the moment, it's 6:45 and time for the news headlines with Tim Humphrey.
The US House of Representatives has voted to send Donald Trump impeachment hearing to the Senate. Russia's Prime Minister has resigned after President Vladimir Putin outlined constitutional changes that could allow him to stay in charge after his presidential term ends. And a man wanted over the murder of PC Sharon Beshenivsky nearly 15 years ago has been arrested in Pakistan. LBC weather turning windier in the west tonight, but it should be mainly dry, a low of 3 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff. There are queues on the M20 westbound. The exit Slip Road to the M25 at Junction 1 for Swanley is closed for emergency repairs. It's slow on the M25 clockwise from Junction 22 for St Albans to Junction 24 for Butters Bar. That's because the car's broken down. There are still queues on the M25 going anti-clockwise towards Junction 23 for the A1M after emergency repairs earlier on. In Kingston, Richmond Road northbound is closed near Sainsbury's. That's because of an investigation, so there are delays. It's slow in Paddington on the A5 Edgware Road northbound because of an investigation near Edgware Road Tube Station. And on the trains, Great Northern and Thameslink have delays of up to 20 minutes through Finsbury Park. That's because of electrical supply problems.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Cross question at 8 with Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent, Suella Braverman, the Conservative MP, David Van Day, the former dollar singer, and comedian Konstantin Kessin.
Ian Dale on LBC.
When things around the house aren't going swimmingly, you'll find professional tradespeople who'll always come to the rescue at trustedtrader.com.
Trustedtrader.com. I never belong. I gotta be me. I gotta be me.
This new year, get the whole family singing with an extra £500 off list price across the Skoda range between the 16th and 30th of January. Also available when purchasing with our finance offers. Search Skoda New Year New Car for more details. Driven by something different. Skoda. Exclude CityGo EIV and all SE technology variants. Order by the 30th of January and register by the 31st of March 2020. Offer not available with contract hire. UK retail customers 18 plus. Finance subject to status. Terms and conditions apply. Visit skoda.co.uk.
You're listening to the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry she wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time she runs out of milk. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings accounts.
Standard. Stagnant. Same old, same old. That's not how you describe London. We're, well, different. London loves bright new ideas, embraces vibrant, evolving communities, and isn't afraid of standing out. We deserve an energy company that's as different as we are, one that's fair and affordable for all Londoners. London Power, a different kind of energy company.
How's it going? It's Jack from Drayton's Newsagents here. Someone won the jackpot in last Saturday's lotto draw. Over £7 million. What an excuse to celebrate, eh? So, will you win next?
Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Parents, you know your child. You know the way they learn is different to others. And Interhigh School knows this too. For 15 years, Interhigh has specialised in providing a fully interactive, tailored online school, supporting your child to achieve their best results from primary school age through to A-level. To discover more about Interhigh School, join their next online open evening on the 22nd of January. Register at interhigh.co.uk.
Hello? It's time you swapped your daily grind for some sun, sea, and salsa! Sangria! Sun lounger! Siesta! Salsa! The dip! Sandal! Suntan lotion! We've done salsa, ain't we? In the Seychelles, Spain, or anywhere else in the world at surprisingly low prices. When you need a holiday, it's time to Travel Republic. Book with confidence at Toll Protected.
This is LBC, live from Strasbourg. The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
So last night we debated whether Big Ben should bong for Brexit, and we invited onto the show every single member of the House of Commons Commission who'd commented earlier how expensive this would be and how difficult this would be. Now, they were listening to the show because they sent us a direct statement telling us that Parliament's expert team of clock mechanics have disconnected Big Ben from the clock mechanism. This was in response to a caller who said, surely this isn't too difficult. The clock was removed for restoration. To ring the bells now would require a temporary mechanism to be installed, connected to the clock and tested before Big Ben was struck. The work includes removing the entire floor in the belfry to investigate its current condition. This work will not be completed by the 31st of January, which is why a temporary floor would need to be installed and then removed. And they explain that in broad terms, the estimated cost is $120,000 to sound the bell, plus circa $100,000 for each week of delays. This estimate is based on the fixed costs of installing, testing, operating. I mean, look, they're really making this as difficult. Why not call it 5 million? I mean, they're really trying to make this as difficult as possible. There is going to be a party. It's going to take place in Parliament Square. It'll be a celebration. It's not meant to be divisive. It's not meant to rub anyone's noses in it, but it is a celebration that ordinary folk beat the establishment on this huge issue. And an historic moment is coming after 47 years of membership of this political union. And I want it to be fun and light-hearted. I hope somebody is able to raise the money to get Big Ben to bong. If it doesn't, we've got a backup plan, because we've got really good speakers, and we will, at the precise moment, play a recording of Big Ben. It'll be second best, but it's all we can really do. Back to the NHS, and Sheila says to me on Facebook, you have to tell the receptionist why you want to see a GP. Patient confidentiality went out of the window. So then it's up to them whether you get an appointment. Yeah, I think actually, Sheila, you're right, is that in many GP surgeries, the receptionists are now really very much the gatekeepers. And, you know, if you're in a queue and the receptionist is saying to you, what's the problem? And it's a problem of a personal nature, and you've got to shout it through a glass window. Bit off-putting, isn't it, for some people? Judy says our NHS is the envy of the world. We can all help out by not abusing the service and not going to A&E with minor ailments. I agree with that. People complain they're waiting with a sore throat, whereas the lady having a cardiac arrest should always be the priority. Julie, I think too many people are going to A&E. I'm sure that's right. I think the lack of availability of GP appointments, the lack of availability of GP visits out of hours sends a lot more people to accident and emergency. And one other problem, you know, a lot of people book appointments with GPs and then don't turn up. And a lot of people become regulars at their GP surgeries, convincing themselves that they need to go and see the doctor and going once a week or once every fortnight. And I don't quite know how we deal with that. Lord Winston, Labour peer, suggested a few years ago that what patients should do is pay a deposit for a GP appointment, and if they don't turn up, forfeit that deposit. Now, as soon as he said that, of course, everybody went bonkers. Labour peer wants to make you pay to see your GP. But I'll tell you something, here in France they do that. Here in France, when you book a GP appointment with your number, you know, I think it's 10 or 15 euros for each appointment. If you don't turn up, you get fined it. And I just wonder, would that mean fewer missed GP appointments? It's worth a thought. Des is calling from Redbridge and is a new caller. Des, is Jeremy Corbyn being just too pessimistic about the state of the NHS?
So let me put in context. I'm an NHS consultant.
And hello. Good to hear from you.
So, no, I like to keep this completely apolitical. I don't agree with pretty much anything Jeremy Corbyn says in general. However, we need to take the politics out of the NHS and be have a quite pragmatic conversation with the public. Is the NHS the envy of the world? No. Is it the worst? By no means at all. In fact, we get the best bang for pound, euro, US. If you kind of denominate by how much we spend, the NHS gets the best outcomes. Does it get the best outcomes overall? You get what you pay for. Now, what's the fundamental problems with the NHS itself at the moment? In the world, we are 35th for the number of beds hospitals have. So we are the 5th richest country in the world, but when you compare how many hospital beds we have, we're 35th. If you compare to our EU colleagues per GDP, how much do we spend? We are less than Ireland, less than France, less than Germany, Holland, everyone where you would think we're a comparable economy, we spend far less of our GDP. So we get what we pay for in fundamental terms. You know, people talk about wastage in the NHS. That's just a sideline argument. It's not going to make the dramatic changes we need. We're fundamentally under-resourced. Now, how do we pay for that? I'm not giving an answer, but as a country, we need to decide we need to pay more and we need more hospital beds. How can we have so few hospital beds and then cut in social care and expect any of those systems to be kept going? Now, the other thing that was completely different...
Des, can I just ask you, Des, how long have you been a hospital consultant?
So this is my 3rd year as a hospital consultant, but I've been, as I said, I qualified in 2006. So I've been working within the NHS for over a decade.
A long time. Yeah, a long time. And have you seen the demand increase with a rapidly rising population?
So what we have seen, and I don't accept the immigration argument at all. We have.
Well, what about the population argument, Des? What about the population argument? There are 6 million more people living here.
The demographic of the population, what we have seen is not a number. We have seen more elderly who are living longer with more comorbidities that require far more care. So the complexity of patients is far more. In fact, if we didn't have that increase in population, of which the vast majority have been propping up the NHS. So I work with people from Portugal, Spain, Greece, who have come over in the 2010s after the crash, who have pretty much propped up the NHS as we're going. My father, who's who's Asian, who's an immigrant, who's a general practitioner, has propped up the primary care for the last 20 years. So it's.
In conclusion, Des, and we could argue that for hours, but in conclusion, the figures you give us are quite convincing that we're not spending as much money as relevant countries, and for the 5th richest country in the world to come 35th in beds. Des, thank you for that call. Well, this is my last few minutes in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, having first walked through these doors in July 1999. So in 4 different decades, I've been here in this place, and in a few minutes, I'll be gone. Never to return, I suspect. It's been an amazing journey. A lot of it's been fun. A lot of it's been quite heated. I shall miss the drama of the place. I shall miss being shouted at by Guy Verhofstadt, mocked by hundreds many times over. But politically, I'm pleased. We are leaving. This is my last day. And what a thought. I've spent 4 years of my life in Strasbourg. I find that quite extraordinary. In fact, I need to almost lie down after a cold shower. I'll be back in London tomorrow at 6. Tonight at 10, it's Tom Swarbrick. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
I'll tell you what, 4 years in Strasbourg is a damn sight better than 4 years in Brussels.
It certainly is, Ian. I agree with that.
We shall welcome you back tomorrow, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed. Right, coming up on the show tonight at 8 o'clock, we have a cracking cross-question lineup for you. We will be joined in the studio by LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks. He's paying a royal visit here this week. Suella Braverman, the Conservative MP for Fareham, former Brexit minister, she'll be with us too. The comedian and free speech campaigner Konstantin Kisin will join us. And, wait for this, David Van Day from the pop group Dollar. Huge fan of them in the 1980s.